Budget 2025-26 brought in a host of measures for India Inc. with an emphasis on tax reforms, MSME, export promotion, and ease of doing business being paramount. A revision in MSME classification, steps to boost India's share in global trade, and improving the regulatory landscape got notable mentions among other highlights. To know more on the kind of impact expected from the announcements, I would like to welcome MS Money, partner Deloitte India, Ajay Srivastava, founder GTRI, Anil Bhardwaj, Secretary General FISME, and Rishi Agrawal, CEO TeamLease Regtech. I welcome you all to this webinar. It's great to have you all with us today. Welcome.
Thank you.
To begin with, I want to first, of course, come to the most significant question of the hour, which is your initial reactions to the budget. And that is, of course, on topmost for everybody. So why don't I start with Money? What is your first reaction to the budget?
It's a very good budget, and I'm referring only to the customs duty and indirect tax portions of the budget. There is a lot in the budget on the income tax side also. It's a very good budget because what we have been seeing in this budget, especially on the customs side, is a consolidation of a lot of good work that has happened over the past few years. In the past few years, we have been seeing the customs processes, the processes for importing and exporting goods becoming more and more simplified and streamlined. We have been seeing the number of tariff lines being reduced. We have been seeing a lot of rationalization happening even in respect of the rates of customs duty. So to that extent, what we have seen in this budget is a movement forward in the same direction so that global trade has customs as a facilitator and an enabler, and customs at some point of time does not become a bottleneck for importers and exporters. This has been the philosophy that we have been seeing over the last few years, and this continues very well in the current budget as well.
Right, Mr. Srivastava?
Yeah, two broad points. One, everyone is rightly saying that the people earning up to 12 lakh rupees, there will be no income tax. So it's a great move on 2-3 counts. One, these people earning up to 12 lakh rupees per annum, they were accounting for 90% of the taxpayers and accounting for less than 10% of the tax paid. So when they are not into the tax net, it's a great ease of doing business for the income tax department. They can focus on the bigger amounts and focus their energies there instead of struggling with a large number of people. It's great for the lower middle class people. Of course, more than 1 crore people will be impacted positively. But better than all these things, what's the message that's going on? Government is, in a sense, telling the corporates that we have been announcing so many great initiatives for you. Corporate taxes have been brought down, PLI schemes have been there, but growth is not coming down as expected. So we want growth maybe through middle class route. We want more consumption that may lead to growth. So whereas in all the budgets, the focus was on kicking growth through corporates, supporting corporates. Now we want to support corporates also, but we want to improve consumption that may help corporates sell more goods and services. So it may be good for the growth. So that's point number one, that income tax exemption has a very wider and deeper limitations. It may support the growth. Second is that I don't understand in my mind this lakh crores number, so I translated into billions of dollars. So what I found is that our receipts are about $585 billion and expenditures exceed $50 billion more to the receipts. Now this deficit is 8 to 9% and our receipts are about 15% of our GDP. So tax receipts are very less. 15% is very less compared to many other countries. And the problem is with the receipts is that 1/4 of the receipts, they are in terms of borrowing. We are borrowing to support our expenditure. And as a result, if we look at where the rupee is spent, 20% is going towards interest income. Now, what does this mean? This means two things. As most of the state governments, including and the central government also, they are pressurized to spend more and more on freebies. There is the space for developmental expenditure is shrinking by the day. That's why we see very insignificant allocations for important sectors like education, R&D, science and technology, social development, other things. So these are two key takeaways from my side. Thank you.
Right. And Mr. Bhardwaj, want to come to you now on this.
I feel this is a growth-oriented budget and a balanced budget in the sense that it intends to talk on two legs. So the last couple of years, we have seen that the growth has largely been coming through investment, and that too government-led investment. But this time, I think there has been a realization in the establishment that there is a need for the consumption also to join in order to make the growth more sustainable. And by introducing the income tax relief, the bet the finance minister has taken is that the consumption should also join the party, and the economic growth would be further enhanced and also becomes more sustainable. I think this is, to me, a very important message. The second number of things she could have taken, but I think she has relied more on pronouncing or proposing commissions and committees. So let's see what comes out of that.
Yes. Implementation, it would be just as important and key to the reforms that have been announced. Rishi, I want to come to you on this question now.
Sure. Well, Neha, thanks for having me here. Really excited. It's an excellent budget, provides a much needed shot in the arm for growth and jobs. Finance Minister has done an amazing job in balancing growth with fiscal prudence. The fiscal deficit targets have not been diluted in spite of dents in the direct tax collections. The good news is that she has put over 1 lakh crores in the hands of consumers, leading to a spurt in demand. Hopefully, it kicks off a private investment cycle, which has been lagging in the last few years. This, in turn, should also have a spiraling impact on economic activity and jobs. I'm particularly excited because there's a continuity of focus on ease of doing business, ease of compliance. We hear that in her budgetary speech. We've heard that in the last few years. Both these words have continued to stay on top of her mind. It was great to hear about Regulatory Reform Commission, soft touch compliance regime, continued focus on decriminalization via Jan Vishwas 2.0, and digital initiatives such as Bharat Trade Net. So all in all, a great budget.
Right. So a lot of growth spurts, which are visible through the measures that have been announced. On a similar note, I want to come to money now, and we were talking a bit, Money, about trade facilitation, which has also been one of the focus areas in the budget. So there was a move to fix a time limit for finalizing provisional assessment for importers. How helpful do you think this will be? And should the provision of time limits be extended to all forms of customs dispute?
That's a very good point that you're making, Neha. So provisional assessment, as I said, fixing up a time is something which was long overdue. It's something which has not come, sooner than later. Ideally, should have come a few years, back. But nevertheless, it has happened now. And just so that we all understand, so what happens when there is a provisional assessment? When there is a provisional assessment, the value of goods imported into India are provisionally assessed. And therefore, at a later point of time, if there is a customs duty demand on those goods, by that time, the imported goods have been sold, rebranded, repackaged, sold in India, proceeds have been remitted, everything is over. Now, just imagine an importer of goods into India imports imports a container and sells the goods in India. He does the pricing. Now, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, someone comes and say, hey, you did that in 2020. Now we are in 2025. Can you please cough up some customs duty for that? Who does he go and collect it from? So finalization of provisional assessment is something which ideally should have happened a while back, but we are delighted it's happening, now. And this is also not to be taken in isolation. This is one of the series of measures for trade facilitation. It's one of the steps that has been taken over the past few years to make it easier for importers and exporters of goods in India. Because on the one side, we keep saying that we want to increase our exports. We want the export earnings from goods to be far more, because today we have a challenge as a nation that our earnings from export of services are increasing very rapidly, whereas our earnings from export of goods have not increased to the desired extent. Now, if exports have to increase, then we have to do a lot of liberalization in respect of the export procedures. A lot of that has happened. Also, and this is important, we have to bear in mind that the goods that we are exporting, the products that we are exporting, many of them have significant import content. Many of them are not 100% organically manufactured in India. They have significant amount of import content. So the import of the components and the import of the sub-assemblies are intricately linked to the export of the finished product. And therefore, when we do import liberalization, it also has a significant impact in terms of our ability to export, not only from a logistics point of view, also from a cost point of view. Because the larger amount of time goods spent in ports, either at the import stage or at the export stage, it's add to the cost of the exporter. And therefore, when we say that provisional assessment now has to be done in 2 years, I would ideally suggest, as you rightly put it, to say that there has to be a time limit for all the procedures in customs. So we also have a procedure called special valuation branch, which is in respect of related party imports. There needs to be a process prescribed for that in terms of a very small timeline by which a dispute, if any, can be raised by the tax authorities. Beyond that, the disputes will not be entertained. So the more we go into all of these things, the more we realize that the people in the government, the people responsible for making policy, are well aware of the challenges faced by the exporters and the importers of goods, and they are working towards that. To that extent, the changes that have happened in this budget are only part of a process that was set in motion a few years back, and we hope to see more of that as we go ahead.
Right, and as you said, it was in the offing for a long time, and good that it has finally come, and more things to follow after this. But it is progress. It is a step in the right direction. On a similar note, Rishi, since we are on the note of ease of doing business, I want to come to you and ask you about also there has been the announcement for setting up of a high-level committee for regulatory reform in the non-financial sector to identify bottlenecks and harassment. So would you want this to be expedited, where the ministry itself identified such needs? Because a lot of times the high-level committee reports sometimes never tend to see the daylight. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a step in the right direction, Neha. While the announcement is a welcome step, there's always a risk that such reports get delayed, never translate into actionable reforms. The committee has been given a 1-year timeline to identify such discrepancies and make recommendations. It will be interesting to see what the committee comes out with. But one of the areas where the government has already done a lot of work is labor reforms. Labor is the elephant in the room. Over 50% of our compliances for an MSME unit comes from labor. The current labor laws are archaic. A number of them were created in the colonial times, where the socio-economic demographic considerations of the country were very different from what they are today. The 21st century Indian entrepreneur needs, a new framework for labor laws. So a lot of legislative and executive actions have been taken. I would like the committee to expedite how we can take the work, the body of work that has been put together in the last few years, and take them to fruition. So that is certainly an area where I would like to see some action. Additionally, I would also want to see clear timelines for the committee's report, a lot of transparency in public disclosures on what these findings are, so that these findings don't end up being brushed under the carpet for political considerations, amongst other. Direct accountability and involvement of the industry stakeholders should be there. There are people who go through these regulations and bear the brunt of them on a day-to-day basis. They should be a part of the policy making process. The committee should do consultations with the industry before they finalize these regulations. But things like Jan Vishwas 2.0, Prime Finance Minister spoke about 100 odd items as a part of that. There are over 5,000 under the purview of union government, and a lot more has to be done in this area. So I would like the Regulatory Reforms Commission to work with a sense of accountability, timelines, and ownership and get something real and actionable out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and of course, the timeline would make all the difference, right? In something like this, the committee, I mean, the kind of provisions it does and the way it moves forward, that would be key in understanding the difference made on ground. I want to now come to the MSME sector, which is, of course, another major plank of growth for the economy. And Mr. Bhardwaj, I want to ask you about the change in the definition of MSMEs. Now, firms with a turnover of rupees 500 crore are classified as medium firms. So, how significant is this, and how will it help MSMEs?
See, as a matter of fact, from Federation of Indian Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, we should be thankful to the Finance Minister. It was a very specific suggestion given by FISME to Finance Minister that the turnover limit for medium enterprises should be made to 500 crore from 250. And for small, we had written 150. So she has taken 200. So as a matter of fact, the rationale had been that, quite a number of important initiatives with regards to MSMEs, whether it is regards to public procurement, whether it is market access initiative, whether it is access to funds and so on, are related to or tied with definition. What happened is after COVID and from 2020 to 24, that, the raw material prices have increased tremendously. Take the example of gold, more than 30% rise. Similarly, steel and copper, etc. So all these small enterprises became medium enterprises, and they were kind of elbowed out from the public procurement, because public procurement 25% set aside is available only for micro and small enterprises. Similarly, the case of gems and jewelry exporters, because of the gold prices, suddenly they were no more being able to access funds that were allocated to MSMEs. So a rationalization of a definition was necessary. See, earlier it was tied to investment only, investment in plant and machinery. So very quick definitional changes were not required. But the moment we have a definition which is tied to turnover, so turnover is directly linked to the raw material prices, the cost of raw material. So there are units like, thousands of units which are producing, for example, ACSR conductor or wires, So where 85% to 90% is just the raw material cost. So if the raw material cost increases by, say, 30%, 35%, their turnover equally increases by 30, 35% without making any material change in their working. So that's why it was necessary. And secondly, apart from this fact, it would also help them tap funds, especially equity. You have seen in the last 1.5 years, a large number of MSMEs tapping SME IPOs and raising funds through equity and making investment in plant and machinery. And the moment they have done it, they again moved out from micro to small or small to medium and large. So I think this additional doubling of investment criteria, turnover criteria, would enable them make investments, attract investments, go for value addition, or you can say technological upgradation. I believe it is a very good decision, and it was something that was demanded by the MSME sector.
Right, and again, the focus is very much apparent on MSMEs, and hence this major announcement has been there in the budget for them. This revision in the classification. Mr. Srivastava, we've spoken about MSMEs, ease of doing business, taxes. We cannot leave out exports, which is also major when it comes to growth as a growth for India's growth trajectory. So, do you think there was enough done for the sector, and what were some of the key announcements which you think can make a visible difference on ground?
So first thing, we must understand that export is not the primary responsibility of Ministry of Finance. It's the primary job of Ministry of Commerce and Industry and DGFT. Within this constant budget has announced certain measures which will be having some impact. So the major measures is one, export promotion mission has been announced. It has two components. One is easing credit problem for the MSMEs. And second is Bharat Trade Net. These exporters have to visit more than 10 departments to comply with the regulatory requirements for doing exports. And most of these departments are online, but they are not connected seamlessly. So Bharat Trade Net aims to make a single interface for the exporters, and we have to see that it succeeds. That's number one. Number two, the problem with the export mission is that budget allocated is just 2,250 crore rupees. It's too less. And there was one functioning scheme, interest equalization scheme, with the budget of 2,500 crore rupees. Government discontinued that. And I think probably allocated most of the budget to this Bharat Trade Mission with this. We have to see how it performs. Second, some tariff cuts were undertaken in anticipation of Trump's tariff, maybe to make him happy. So on few items, for example, we all know Trump has been targeting India, say for higher tariffs on its Harley Davidson. So government has cut tariffs on motorcycles for small capacity motorcycles from 50 to 40%, and for bigger motorcycles from 50 to 30%. Only thing is that it may not help US too much because its imports of Harley Davidson, all other motorcycles, is less than $3 million. Other items on which tariffs have been eliminated to help US was Ethernet switches, where tariffs have been cut down from 20 to 10%. But US imports are about $600 million in this. It will be helping them. And then satellites, we last year imported satellites and parts worth $80 million from US. So tariffs have been eliminated on this. All these things we hope should make Trump happy, and he doesn't look at our side on tariff side. So these are two things. And third is government is very cognizant that our participation in GVC is less. So a committee or group has been announced where officers and industry people will be discussing and selecting sectors on which to focus. But only thing is that we must understand the prime reason we are not integrating the GVC, everybody knows that, is delayed processing at the ports. If every other country like Vietnam or Singapore or Hong Kong or South Korea, they sorted this out. We cannot allow our imports to take place 3-4 days, exports to take 1 or 2 days at the ports. It should be in hours. Everybody has done this. We should, unless we do that, GVC integration, it will remain at the top level. So these are the few measures on the exports announced in this budget. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for that summary. Of course, there have been some duties, BCD, as you were saying, and also there are some aspects regarding ports which still needs to be done and expedited. Mani, Mr. Srivastava spoke a bit about the tariffs that have been announced, and pertaining to that, I want to ask that the budget has focused on rationalizing tariffs. So how significant were some of the moves, and do you think there was something which got missed out?
Okay, so what we have seen again, this budget, of course, and some of the preceding budgets as well, tariff rationalization happens in respect of two areas. There are certain tariffs in respect of essential medicines or medical equipment or articles of necessity for the country, which is socially necessary. Now, we have been seeing a rationalization of that over the past few years. This budget is no exception. We have seen a lot of tariff changes, tariff exemptions being given to cancer medication of various kinds. And this is something that we have been seeing for quite a few years now. So whenever we have got various products which are socially desirable, the customs duty tariff on that is brought down or it is eliminated altogether. This is one area. The other area are tariffs in respect of products which are of the country's interest. And this again is in two categories. The first bucket is in respect of components and products which are used by Indian manufacturers to manufacture and export. This is one category of products which has seen a tariff reduction over the last few years. We have seen this, for instance, in respect of parts for manufacture of mobile phones in the past. And when there was a reduction in respect of the components that go into mobile phone manufacturing ecosystem, that led to a situation where today we are exporting mobile phones to a large number of countries. So that has been a success story. In this budget, what they have tried to do is to go one step further and replicate what they did in respect of mobile phone manufacturing to mobile phone charger manufacturing and also in respect of EV battery manufacturing. Now, both of these typically signify that we are now trying to have an ecosystem where the entire schedule of the ecosystem is managed through the country. Some of us who have been doing this since many years will recollect, possibly 10, 15 years back, we were not even self-sufficient in respect of the ecosystem on automobiles. Now, over the number of years, majority of the automobile components are manufactured in India, and there is a very good cluster that has got built around the places where auto companies are based. And these component manufacturing companies today are doing very well on their own. They are exporting on their own as well. They are also resulting in import substitution, which earlier used to be imported into India. Similar kind of measure we have seen in this budget also for specified industries. Now, here we need to be careful because if we open the floodgates too wide open, if we now extend this to a very large number of products, we are going to be flooded with cheap imports of undesirable products. At the same time, we keep the door very, very restricted and very, very limited, then we are not going to get the components which are going to help the country develop. Because all of this has to be dovetailed into Viksit Bharat, which is what has been the focus of the government. To a very large extent, when we are talking of global trade and foreign trade, we also have to bear in mind that that has to dovetail with Atmanirbhar Bharat. So when we look at Viksit Bharat and Atmanirbhar Bharat as two components of the government's policies, the role that foreign trade can play in this, and therefore what needs to be done in respect of customs duties, that is the progression that we have seen in this budget as well.
All right, okay, perfect. And I want to come to Mr. Srivastava, and we were talking about Bharat Trade Net just in the previous in your previous response. So how significant would that be? If you can elaborate a bit on the kind of impact that you see, that it will have as far as exports in helping exports grow. How do you see that coming up?
It will be, if done right, it will be a super game changer. How? Today, all our regulatory interfaces, they are department centric. 10, 15 departments are there in which one exporter has to approach. If we make it a user-centric, exporter-centric, there will be only one interface through which the exporter will be talking. And this simplification will allow the shift of many MSMEs which are doing business domestically to become exporters. And I expect more than 5 lakh MSMEs turning into exporters in 2-3 years' time if we do it simply this. And we have been trying this. Different departments have been simplifying their own processes, but there is no steps taken in integrating and presenting one interface to the exporter. And department centric motives are there, where they basically integration means losing the power, and that's why it may not be happening. But many of the countries, like Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, and many other countries, they have achieved almost a single user interface for the exports fronts. But in all these countries, they face the vested interest, department-centric vested interest. And PMs in all the countries, they headed the projects for a single window, like BharatNet, we are talking about this. And in Singapore, Commerce Minister headed, but the Commerce Minister later became the PM. So that's the priority. If we can give that priority here, it will be a game changer for Indian exports. Today, we don't have more than 50,000 active exporters. MSMEs products are being exported through the large exporters. We want MSME to export directly. And this Bharat Trade Net, if done right, will done wonders for Indian economy.
Yeah. Right, like a unified trade portal, and which again will help in facilitating trade in a more seamless manner. And at this point, I want to come to Mr. Bhardwaj. And while we've spoken a lot of aspects related to export growth and trade and ease of doing business, I want to mention about the economic survey, which talks about how we are seeing fragmentation in trade. So, with that in mind, is export-led growth still possible, and is the budget in that direction?
The economic survey is a very important document, and the chief economic advisor has flagged very important issue in this regard. If you look at from 2020 to 24, more than 23,000 barriers have been notified to WTO by different countries. So there has been a tremendous rise of barriers that are created to international trade. So, I mean, there is a very, what should I say, conflicting evolutions are there. Trade is increasingly becoming unified on its own, in the sense that, tasks are being exported now rather than the products. So there is more integration required. But the countries want it to be broken down by creating various barriers. I mean, in India also, we have seen hundreds of quality control orders issued in India, and we are restricting imports. Other countries are also doing the same thing, maybe in different pace. But the fact remains, the more barrier you create, the more difficulties you create for trade, and more difficult it would be for exports, particularly for a country like India, which is, I think, barely 3% we have the market share of the global world trade. And there is huge potential, yes, for India to increase exports. But given our own difficulties created by our own government, unfortunately, in the form of access to competitively priced raw materials, look at steel, look at copper, look at aluminum, polymers, glasses, and so on. And you see that, we are creating all kind of barriers, not only just the tariff barriers, but non-tariff barriers, anti-dumping duties, and also safeguard duties. And the cumulative impact of all these put together is that, our raw material prices are almost 30 to 40% higher than the prevailing international prices, making MSME exports absolutely uncompetitive. So MSMEs have been made or rendered uncompetitive by this regime, whereas the large industries are just not interested in exports. They are gaining, rather, they are having the dream run by raking in record profits thanks to these barriers that have been created. So we are in a very you can say, difficult situation as a country. I mean, if we want to realize the potential of India's exports, then we have to free it up. And we don't need to really, you can say, wait for others to free their economies. In our own interest, we need to do it to create sustainable growth, as a matter of fact, and increase the growth of economy within India also. This is what I feel.
Right. As you said, it just makes exports highly uncompetitive in that scenario. And with the kind of targets that we have as a nation, I think it's only in our best interest to get these roadblocks out of the way. I want to come to Rishi, and again, I want to make a reference to the economic survey about how it talked about states having to play a larger role in EODB, and that the onus lies with them. So, do you agree with this approach, and how difficult will it be to get individual states on board? I mean, the previous examples or the history has not really been in favor of this argument. So, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely, Neha. I think the union government can only go so far. It can deal with subjects that are on the union list only. There are a number of subjects, including labor, which is on the current concurrent list, where states make the regulations. There are other items such as land, construction, building, water, electricity, which affect entrepreneurship and job creation, that are on the state list, and states have to move the needle on them. Just to quote some examples here, 80% of the provisions for jail term, as per our report, jailed for doing business, they come from the states. Only about 20% are from the union government. At least 5 states in the country, out of them are vying to become $1 trillion economy each. they have provisions greater than 1,000 as per our report. So it is in the state's own interest to make sure that the entrenched hostility is reduced. They have their own versions of Jan Vishwas equivalent in their states. Regulatory Reforms Commission be established in their own states. There's a lot of duplication, overlap, and redundancies in the business laws. A number of these come from states where union government can do very little. So states have to bite the bullet. They have to take up some of these items. Union government has already set up a template in form of Jan Vishwas 1.0. Finance Minister mentioned Jan Vishwas 2.0 with over 100 items for decriminalization yesterday. Now I think the states need to take that template and run with it. Parallelly, as I said earlier, there are over 2,000 websites that publish regulatory updates, and it creates information asymmetry in the country. Every state approximately has 80 to 120 such websites where they are publishing regulatory updates. States have to take up an initiative and make sure all these updates are put on a common portal, which is searchable, sortable, subscribable, so that information asymmetry can be killed in the country. Additionally, a lot of these filings that entrepreneurs do at a state level, they are still done in a traditional way. They need to go and publish APIs so that straight through filings can be enabled. So all of these are items where, while the union government has to continue its action, long-term sustainable outcomes in the economy will not get created unless states join the party. At least 5 to 6 states in the country, the likes of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, and amongst others, they are vying to become a $1 trillion economy, and they need to pick up reform process via some of these items and create the state open compliance grids in order to make this a reality.
Right, and I think without all of them coming on board, the collective growth will remain a dream. So definitely that is something to think about. And so we've spoken a lot about what the budget has done and the kind of initiatives it has got on board. On a closing note, I want to ask you all that what remained undone? What did the FM miss? Of course, there might be a lot of things, but some of the key aspects which you think should have been included. And Mani, I'll start with you.
Okay, so two things from the budget which possibly could have helped more. One is in respect of customs and the other is in respect of GST. So on customs, for quite some time, we have been hearing that there is a benchmarking exercise which the government has done in the past in respect of comparing India's trade facilitation measures with other countries. Someone mentioned Singapore, which may not be the right country to compare because we are a much more complex, much more landlocked country in some ways. But if we compare ourselves with some of the good countries in Europe, it may be a good measure to benchmark ourselves with them and have a time frame of 5 years or 10 years to reach there. So that is one expectation that I would have, from this budget or the subsequent budgets. The other is in respect of GST. Look, while GST decisions are entirely the prerogative of the GST Council, which is the center plus states, and therefore GST does not find a big mention in the union budget because the central government can only enact those laws which the GST Council has passed. However, from a GST side, what businesses would be looking at are two aspects. One, we have been hearing about rate rationalization in GST for quite some time. There is also a committee that has been made for rationalizing the GST rates. Where do things stand, and can we have some kind of a time frame of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to enable businesses to prepare? Equally important is the fact that petroleum products continue to remain outside the purview of GST, despite the fact that it just requires the GST Council to come to an agreement on a phase-wise inclusion of petroleum products in GST. So we can have products which impact fewer states like natural gas or aviation turbine fuel, and maybe finally followed by petrol and diesel. But a roadmap again in respect of that for the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years would really help industry plan things, because we are in a situation today where businesses in India need to compete with other entities worldwide for every single product and every single service. And when you make a business plan, you make a business plan for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So if If these aspects are shared with businesses, businesses will be better equipped to plan for the future so that they remain competitive in future as well. These would be my two broad asks from the Union Finance Minister.
Great. Right. Mr. Srivastava, what about you?
I would love FM to announce the formation of a group to look into the simplification processes of sectoral nature. For example, steel, textile, as Mr. Anil Bhardwaj rightly mentioned, I would like to just focus on steel. You know, our steel imports are just 6% of our consumption. But look at how we are regulating the imports. Steel Ministry wants Steel Ministry with the BIS, they have issued quality control orders on about 10% of the grades of steel. But Steel Ministry wants all the remaining 90% of the grades of the steel which are being imported, even though they are not covered under the QCO, to come to them and take NOC that they are not covered. So they don't trust the importers here. Then Steel Ministry wants, they set up a complicated system of SIMs where you register all the consignments there. That system does not work most of the time. It throws many problems all the time. So such problems are there not only in the steel sector, textile sector, chemical sector. So let's not talk about the general thing. Let's move from general talking to specific things. And it cannot be done at the ministry level because they are the one who are not able to see the bigger gains for the country. And I'm very sure if we can handle the task for 3-4 ministries, our GDP rate growth rate will increase by 2% at least. I'm very sure of this. Thank you very much.
Right. Mr. Bhardwaj, what about you?
I feel the budget is a good opportunity to irrevocably, reaffirm the commitment before the internal as well as external audience. And we should have been very clear what we want. What we want is the protection we want, or we want the openness. The message has to be clear. You can't really ride these two horses together. You can't have the protection at the same time and openness at the same time. I think we are confused as a country. So far as announcement of these three committees are concerned, people who have been around for some time, they know that, we have seen that happening in UPA 1, exactly three committees. One is National Manufacturing Competitiveness Commission, NMCC, that went on for 10 years. We had the Committee for Exports also. I was part of all these three committees. That's what I'm saying. It was under Prime Minister's Principal Secretary on exports. And third, regulatory reform with the committee headed by Damodar in UPA 1. So we have taken the cue. We are repeating the same thing. I think there is a need to reaffirm, like what Bajpayee had said very clearly. We want openness. We want privatization. We want this the gist of Indian entrepreneurship to unleash, to make India a rich country. I mean, unless we have full conviction on these fundamental issues, we'll have confusion. And I think on that part, confusion has prevailed.
Excellent. And Rishi, you on the final notes.
Sure. Just a couple of items. I think right before budget, there was an announcement of leveraging PAN 2.0 as a common business identifier, which actually makes the primary plumbing for a number of future reforms which need to be built on a common identifier. Today, our enterprises have at least 23 unique identities. I would have loved to see some budgetary allocation for moving these 23 unique identities linked back to PAN 2.0. That didn't happen. Second, there's some progress being made on entity DigiLocker. We've seen what kind of benefits unfold when DigiLocker for citizens was created. I mean, Digi Yatra is just a breeze through the airports, and that is a next level application that got created. I would have loved to see some budgetary allocation so that in an expedited manner, all the licenses, registrations, permissions, consent orders, a variety of NOCs and stuff issued by state and union government could have come to DigiLocker in an expedited manner. So that was the second one. Third, there are over 2,000 websites which publish regulatory updates. Finding regulatory updates for an entrepreneur, especially a multi-state entrepreneur, is a nightmare. There are 9,000 plus regulatory changes that affect doing business in the country every year, hundreds of changes a month, and there is no single source of truth. This has created a lot of information asymmetry. I would have loved to see some budgetary allocation to creating searchable, sortable, and filterable common portal for regulatory updates. The last item is API-enabled filings. UPI created an aha moment for the country in digital payments. Digitization is something that can take benefits to population scale. We need to do a similar aha for ease of doing business as well. API-enabled filings is one of them. We've already seen the template being created in income tax and GST. We need to extend that to other areas of the government as well. I would have loved to see some budgetary allocation so that some action would have started in that space. Outside of that, budget was fantastic.
Right. Of course, there will always be room for more. And, but having said that, there have been a lot of announcements that have been made, which everybody was really looking forward to, be it in terms of trade, tax, MSMEs. And of course, more to be done, as you all said, being specific instead of general. And as Mr. Bhardwaj also said, that having the clarity of what we really want, I think that would be really important as far as trade is concerned, as far as our competitiveness is concerned as an economy. So thank you everyone for your insights today, and it has been a very it has been enriching to know how the budget can help in moving the economy forward and what is expected ahead. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, looks like we can drop off.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.